Welcome back to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. I'm John Kiriakou, here with Michelle Witte. Independent journalist Matt Taibbi testified before the House Subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government today about his findings in the so-called Twitter files related to protection of the First Amendment. In his opening statement, Taibbi said, quote, "The original promise of the internet was that it might democratize the exchange of information globally. A free internet would overwhelm all attempts to control information flow, its very existence a threat to anti-democratic forms of government everywhere. What we found in the files was a sweeping effort to reverse that promise and use machine learning and other tools to turn the internet into an instrument of censorship and social control. Unfortunately, our own government appears to be playing a leading role," unquote. Taibbi answered myriad questions about the Hunter Biden laptop story, the Hamilton 68 dashboard, Twitter's decision to squelch dissent on the Ukraine issue, and the roles of the CIA, the FBI, the Departments of Defense, Homeland Security, and Health and Human Services in promoting or in killing stories. President Joe Biden presented his budget to congressional lawmakers today, and it was immediately declared to be dead on arrival. But that was the plan all along. With Republicans seeking to use the federal debt as a 2024 campaign issue against the president, he intends to use the fact that the debt increased by $6 trillion during the Trump administration against Republicans. With that said, the budget process is broken. Obviously, military spending is out of control. The portion of the federal budget that's discretionary spending is shrinking as more and more of the budget is off limits, and neither the White House nor the Congress has the guts to do anything about it. Steve Grumbine is the founder and CEO of the nonprofits Real Progressives and Real Progress in Action and host of the podcast Macro and Cheese. He's also a leading activist and evangelist for modern monetary theory. Steve, welcome back.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on, guys.
Oh, great to have you, Steve. Let's start with Matt Taibbi, one of my favorite people. He testified on Capitol Hill today, as did Matt Schellenberger, and it seemed to be a love fest, at least on the part of the Republicans, which is ironic to me because there's literally nothing Republican about Matt Taibbi. But let's pick this apart a little bit. Taibbi talked about the role of the CIA, the FBI, the Pentagon, and others at Twitter before Elon Musk purchased the company. In a macro sense, is that what this hearing really was all about?
You know, I don't believe that. Let me tell you what I believe. I believe that whenever Republicans and whenever Democrats have an opportunity to get you, gotcha, have you, they take advantage of it, period, full stop. There's nothing principled about any of this. There are no civil libertarians begging for deep insights here. Yeah. This is 100% an opportunity to play gotcha. And the Democrats and Republicans are both complicit in this game. And we, unfortunately, as civil libertarians and hopeful that people take our concerns seriously, we get a moment of like a little jolt of excitement and enthusiasm, thinking that maybe they're really taking it seriously. But in fairness, their goal is not to free up the internet. Their goal is not to bring back civil liberties. Their goal is to literally get the other team, and that's it. And so it's always an empty moment for me when I watch these things. They were very sympathetic to Matt because Matt has stuff that makes Democrats look bad right now.
Exactly.
And that's it. Nothing more than that. If Matt had things that made them look bad, he would be persona non grata.
I think you are exactly right on that point. Republicans are obsessed with this Hunter Biden laptop story. To me, it's old news. And it's far less important than elements of the government killing the story. That's really the important part. Matt Taibbi talked about the government's role in censoring this and other stories. What does Congress intend to do about it? What do you think they can do about it?
Well, you know, let's just be honest here. What Hunter Biden may or may not have done based on conjecture and, quite frankly, looking at what's happening in Ukraine right now, there is ample reason to believe that not only is this, once again, daddy's derelict getting a handout from somebody based on power dynamics with the U.S. government. Let's be fair, that is going on every day, everywhere, all the time. The rich do this for their kids, period. And I'm 100% against it and would love to see people go to jail for things like this. That said, the interests that the Republicans have in this is merely to embarrass a sitting president. And at the time, it was to prevent him from becoming a sitting president. So, I want to be crystal clear here. There's no nobility in this. While I certainly feel once again, as a civil libertarian and as somebody who's watching extreme, privilege go unchecked, I would love to see this brought down like a halo around his neck. I would love that. I would love nothing more than to see these rich people go down in flames. That isn't what's happening here, and that's not what would happen here. And that's really not the call for it. The purpose of this is, going back to the first statement, it's gotcha politics and literally nothing more than that.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I have to agree with you. When I was on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee staff, much of what we did, especially the hearings, was just for show. There was rarely any follow-up, and there was never, ever legislation that came out of a hearing. Never.
Never.
We had a hearing once. I probably have told this story before. We had Captain Phillips. John Kerry asked me if I could track down Captain Phillips. He had just returned home after being taken hostage by pirates off the coast of Somalia. I tracked him down at home in Vermont, invited him to come and testify. And it was such a big deal. We had to move the hearing out of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing room into the Armed Services Committee hearing room because it was 4 times bigger. And it made the cover of Time, and it made the cover of People. And Kerry joked that it was the first time he was ever on the cover of People magazine. And then when the hearing was done, and the place was just packed to the gills, when the hearing was done, I said to Kerry, so now what do we do? And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, this was such a wild success. Like, what do we do now? Do we write legislation? Do we follow up with state? And he looked at me like I was nuts. And he's like, no, we did our thing. That's the end of it. And I mentioned this to my boss, and he's like, you think that we have an impact? We don't have any impact. This was all for show. And I can't help but to think that that's what we're seeing today. I'm excited that Matt Taibbi is testifying on Capitol Hill. I'm excited that it's being carried on the major news networks. But I can't imagine that anything substantive actually comes out of it. What are your thoughts on this? Should it be? Will it be any different?
No, it won't be. Again, you would need to have a panel that is like a special panel, a special council of some variety to weigh this independently. And I don't know how you find independent people that would be appointed by partisan people.
Yes.
I don't know how you find an independent panel that could do that. But an independent panel would be required. Just typical, like any other trial almost, where you would have people sequestered and gag ordered and preventing from hearing the news. I would think they would need to be able to go through this stuff with a very sober eye and a very detailed lens and come out the other end with recommendations. That's not going to happen. This is only advantageous to the groups that want to see the other side wriggle around, writhe around as the spotlight gets on them. And it is purely performative. I'm sad. I don't want that to be the case, but I no longer see. I've looked everywhere, John, and I can't find evidence of real governance. I can't find evidence of real serious people. I can't find evidence of people that have convictions, that have beliefs, that have honest values, that go after things that make sense, go where the facts take them. They are literally there for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is, hey, here's this little break point in the spectrum. If it starts wandering over past 0 over here to -1 where our side is, we shut it down. As long as it stays to the right of that 0, we're good, because that'll be getting on them. And that is it. I genuinely believe there's no, because you think about this, it doesn't take much to extrapolate this out. We still don't have any white-collar criminals prosecuted from the cabal that collapsed the economy. With the savings and loan, going back there, you had some, but then countrywide and the rest of them, we've just had a revolving door between Wall Street and Congress, or Wall Street and government. We don't see any meaningful action taken anywhere at any time, because that's not what the role of government is anymore. Government is there to give us the appearance, to keep us in line as little people, but the rest of the people that live above and beyond that law, they're just as lawless as our United States government is around the world. And there's nothing there unless somebody has a bone to pick with you, and then they'll make a sacrificial lamb of a Bernie Madoff, who was a small-time piker in the grand scheme of all the corruption that was brought about during the Obama administration and beyond. I mean, going back to Bush even, I mean, you do not ever see real meaningful action taken on anyone that doesn't work for a living, if you know what I mean. These people that are living on investment portfolios, these folks will absolutely never go to jail. Never. And even Epstein is a freaking scapegoat of sorts. I mean,
without a doubt.
Talking about
without a doubt.
Just to give the appearance of some fake law and order, there is none.
Yes. Oh, you're absolutely right. Well, Michelle says it all the time.
We were talking about it before. Yeah, I mean, so now first you have Epstein, then you have Ghislaine, but she's also a scapegoat, right? Now you have Jess Staley, maybe.
That's right.
But like, how high does it go? Oh, are we going to get up to Jamie Dimon? I don't know. Are we going to get to sort of like all of these
the Black Book
institutions
not
that
been made public?
Protect them? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Where are the investigations? Yeah, we're not seeing it. There
is no real meaningful intent on any of these things. It's all performative, all of it. And once you break free of expectations, once you stop seeing them as legitimate actors, well, legitimate people doing governance, once you stop pretending and you start accepting as it is, you can see these things rather clearly. It stops being a shocker and it starts being a, when are we going to sharpen the pitchforks?
Isn't that the truth?
You know, I jokingly said this, I just did pun intended here. I was saying, as Powell was talking about how we need to lay off millions of people to kind of squash this, price gouging based inflation, that he thinks the answer to that is laying off millions of people. And I'm like, why in the world does Powell continue to screw with the poor? It's not like he's made of Kevlar.
Yeah.
And yet he keeps shooting bullets at the poor. I'm wondering when those bullets are going to go back at him. These people are literally operating with complete impunity, just absolute recklessness. There's nothing that can touch them. And they do things that are so ridiculously harmful to Main Street, regular people. And there's literally zero repercussion. Zero. So it's unbelievable. It's impossible. If you're a thinker, it is impossible to take this seriously. I mean, it's serious, but the game is not. The game is a veneer. The game is there to keep you, like in this jello world, man. You're like living in a fake world, and as long as you're willing to eat that steak, even though you know it's fake, Cypress, or this is the deal. This is the Matrix. It really is.
Yeah.
Isn't that the truth? Another one of the things that Taibbi said today in this hearing was that Federal Trade Commission Chair Lina Khan demanded that Twitter reveal the names of journalists who had been granted access to Twitter records.
Yeah.
Taibbi said that no journalists covering the Twitter files had asked for or received access to user data, but that a whole bunch of different governmental entities had gotten exactly that information, and that Khan's request was what he called ridiculous government overreach. Why would this information be important to the likes of the FBI or the Department of Homeland Security? Why do they want it? And did they get it? Do we know?
Well, let me just take a step back here. DeSantis's gang, it didn't come directly from DeSantis, but I can't imagine he wasn't part of it. But there's a law that they're trying to push to make bloggers that would critique or say anything about Florida, DeSantis, you name it, to have to register basically as lobbyists if they write anything about him critical whatsoever. And so this is, once again, a means of suppressing information. It's a means of letting people know we know you're the one. We have eyes on you. Be careful what you say. Be careful what you show. We're going to have to do a little digging to see what's in your closet. Let's make sure that you're clean. Oh, we found some. Because again, they're going to protect wealth, but they will not protect the people seeking to expose wealth. So, the days of, Daniel Ellsberg and others who blew whistles, I mean, it's becoming harder and harder and harder to be a whistleblower like a John Kiriakou, right? I mean, you got to be willing to pay that price. And they're making the price extremely high. And people are just humans, I mean, we're flesh and blood, and, we bleed, and they know that. And they know that we are not sovereign beings that can just fancy out our own money and take care of our own issues. They know that we're locked in a system that if we step out of line, we can be literally removed from that system and made destitute and put in jail and so forth. So I think this is a very terrifying time. Let me just say that.
The Federalist, which is that sort of libertarian right-wing online, they noted today that nothing that Taibbi or Mike Schellenberger said today was new. But because most of the mainstream media have ignored the Twitter files, the information would seem new to most news viewers. With this testimony today, do you expect more coverage of this story? And if so, because of the broader exposure, do you expect any kind of changes to come out of Congress? After all, why hold the hearings in the first place unless it's to do what I said a moment ago, just to get yourself on TV?
I think that there is a couple things at play. Number one is, yes, get yourself on TV. But I think the other thing is that there is enough people out there that are easily duped and are easily persuaded that it's such a partisan world out there that it's just an act of heroism that they even brought it up. And so they get away with the veneer of floating these bubbles out there and seeing how they play out, and then kind of watching to see the reactions, to see, is this something we want to campaign on? Is this something we want to elevate at a different time? Is this something that we can use to our advantage? But I think that what you're going to see, and this is very unfortunate, is you got a lot of lefties, anti-war lefties, anti-government surveillance lefties, folks that trend in the civil libertarian space, almost to the point of just anti-establishment lefties, who have sadly taken the bait on some of this, right? They feel like, well, they're saying it, Tucker Carlson's saying it, so-and-so's saying, they must be better than they're out-lefting the left. No, they're not out-lefting the left, knuckle sandwich. No. They're not out-lefting the left. They're opportunists. They're using this moment for partisan gain and nothing more. But because you are as angry as I am at the Democrats, let's say, you say, hey, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Exactly.
And therefore, you confuse this stuff. But the problem is that anybody with an ounce of principle would understand that it's not only not going to lead to anything, it's actually giving air cover to the wrong thing. Stay principled, stay centered, know who you are, and recognize these guys are not your friends. Stop making them. Stop being Scar and allowing the hyenas into the Pride Land tag on it. I mean, this is ridiculous. And what I'm finding is things like this get a lot of hype from some people. Yeah, look, they're doing it. And the veneer should be easy to see through, and yet it's not.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there are some other downstream things that come with that. And that is, like, you look at places like North Carolina and South Carolina and places where they're even talking about making abortion something that you can have a death penalty for.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
These are the same people that they're elevating and lifting up because they might have a gotcha on the Democrats.
Yeah.
And this perversion masquerades as being a solid civil libertarian leftist. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, I'm not sure that we compute the same way.
Yes, seriously.
That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Don't get it.
I agree with you.
Don't get it.
Let's talk about the budget for a minute. The Washington Post today called the new Biden budget dead on arrival. That reminded me very much of the description every year of Ronald Reagan's budgets. which always had $0 appropriated for the departments of education and energy. But the White House actually wanted this budget to be seen as dead on arrival to force Congress to address it substantively. What exactly is the White House hoping to get out of this process, do you think?
So I've got 3 key points on this. Number one, when you're not in power, and you know budgets reside in Congress, Article 1, Section 8 gives them the power of the purse. So you know that with the Democrats out of power in Congress, that leaves it to Republicans. So this is the lone way of expressing the policy goals and the battle lines by emitting a budget that states, here's what we think, okay? Now, it holds 0 validity because, again, the Democrats don't have Article 1, Section 8 on their side right now. Mm-hmm. So this is their lone way of getting it out there. But the flip side is, and this is quite interesting, there's significant increases in military spending still. There's significant increases in border security now. And there's a few other things there that are quite interesting that you would find Republicans might even be interested in supporting. Things like, returning vets and, tax credits, if you will, for families and things like that, things that the Republicans tend to stand on. And simultaneously, it's dead on arrival because politics, right? Mm-hmm. But I want to take the second part of this, and this is this. Because of the nature of the fights that are going to continue on, this idea of deficit reduction, this idea of debt reduction, we don't fundamentally talk about debt, taxes, or deficit reduction in the correct fashion. And getting Congress to do that is probably more challenging than getting rank and file activists to finally get their head wrapped around it. Although it shouldn't be that way. We should be able to have activists fired up, ready to rock and roll. Here's the thing. We have to decouple taxation and paying for programs from actually writing legislation and creating budgets, because taxation is a tool. It's not a funding mechanism. This is not a financing mechanism. Taxation is all about the strength of the dollar. It's an expression of the balance of society. Mm-hmm. So if you know that you have very, very rich people sucking up all the fat based on the interest payments that are going out with the Fed increasing it, and you know that they're winning on so many other things, I mean, tax breaks, you name it, you would make a tax policy that has nothing to do with the spending policy because they have nothing to do with one another. Mm-hmm. So when we look at this budget, if you just look at what they're offering up for spending, you know what their priorities are. You know where they're going. If you look at what they're trying to tax, you have to ask yourself, do they even understand that there's no such thing as fully paying for a program? Programs aren't paid for. They're always paid for. No matter what, once Congress approves a bill, the funds for the spending is there, period. Yeah, it doesn't wait on taxes.
And let me interrupt you on that point. Sure. Again, when I was working for John Kerry, he mentioned one day in a meeting, a staff meeting, offhandedly, we haven't had an authorization bill in 5 years. Maybe we should pass an authorization bill. Well, I have a master's degree in legislative affairs. When each committee has to authorize the spending that the appropriations committee appropriates. Well, you know what? You actually don't, because government is going to run itself. But there's this make work. You're right, Steve. As soon as the appropriations committee allocates the money, that's it.
Mm-hmm. It's there.
It's there. It's paid for. It's done. There's not even any reason to continue talking about it. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, we've just made all this stuff. This is
the problem, right? We know that the wealthy are too wealthy in America. Mm-hmm. We know that the wealthy have an undue influence not only on the environment, but the lives of regular people in terms of this belief that we will give them all the breaks in the world and it will trickle down to the rest of us as they flush their toilet and hope that the oozy drip makes it to our plates, like Soylent Green. I mean, we have created this environment where we've tried so hard to basically deify the rich.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it's complicit. It's not real. It's not real at all. Because remember, money doesn't come from rich people.
Right.
Money comes from the federal government, who created its own unit of account.
Yeah.
The money, the dollar is a law. Think about that for a minute. The money is a law. The U.S. dollar doesn't have any physical manifestation. It's an inch, a pound, a kilo, or whatever. It is not an actual physical anything. It's a law. It's a settlement. It's credit.
Yes.
It's a debt. It's got nothing to do whatsoever with any of the ways they portray it.
Yes.
So if you understand that, what's that?
I just want to ask how we have gotten to this point where, where you have people, again, sort of this understanding, even aside, even if you are just looking at a checkbook, right?
Right.
We are a country, we have at any given moment, 582,000 homeless people on the streets. We have, I think the figure I saw was 925 billionaires, right? Double the number of our nearest competitor, China. And yet, when we have budget discussions, right? And of course, I'm not leaving out the enormous size of our military, because I imagine that you're going to bring that up, Steve. How has this sort of national discourse on this gotten so poisoned that we can know all of these things and go, well, I don't know, guess we're going to have to cut Medicare because we need to get some dollars. You know what I mean? Like, how can we look at these things and say, well, I guess if we've got to tighten our belts, what we need to do is make sure grandma gets like $15 less a month.
I'm going to tell you this only because I know John's story. John told me a story with his wife, and forgive me for using a little bit of this.
Not at all.
But I just want to say, I had an ex-wife, and I knew she was cheating on me. And I knew it, and back in the day, they used to show you the cell towers where your cell phone would be pinging off of for text messages, for phone calls, and you knew exactly where they were. You could literally track them down the road. And my ex-wife would tell me that she was somewhere entirely different than where her phone was pinging me from. Now, we had a shared account, so I wasn't spying on her. It was our account, so I could see it. But within that scope, in my head, I could convince myself it wasn't happening because the thought of being without my kids was a greater fear than her coming home smelling like she had a good night out. And that right there allowed me to overlook every single possible thing. When it comes to even talking to my current wife, she does not want to hear about the budget. She doesn't want to hear about these things. It's irrelevant to her. It's not anything I can do anything about, so why do I care? And for an activist like me that focuses on this, that's devastating to hear your spouse have so little regard for it. That said, she's not abnormal. She is the standard Real Housewives of Beverly Hills Kardashian type that literally does not want to hear this stuff. And they vote. Okay? So with that in mind, it's not hard to understand that all they have to do is pull an Obi-Wan and wave their hand past you and say, these are not the droids you're looking for.
And of course, there is supposed to be an entity in between us and them that is doing this explaining and making it urgent for people, and they're falling down on the job.
That's right. I mean, think about what the media is also, right? The media is an arm of propaganda for the government. These people, I've spoken to some really high-level people that write for like places like Barron's and Bloomberg and others. And quite frankly, they submit something, and by the time it comes out, not only does it bear no resemblance to what they wrote, but it also has a headline that they have no idea where the hell it came from. They have no idea where a lot of the references come from. A lot of the important points are removed. So the media itself is not actual news. It's fake news. And by the time you get it, it's so sanitized and so saying exactly what they want it to say that you are less smart after reading it than you were before you read it.
Indeed.
Less informed. And so there's part of our problem. We are the most propagandized nation in the world, Steve, by a large measure.
We're a little bit pressed for time, but I have what I think is an important question I wanted to get your thoughts on. We currently spend more money on so-called defense than the next 8 largest countries combined. And at the same time, with Americans living longer and budgets increasingly squeezed and Congress raiding the Social Security Trust Fund, we will likely we likely will have to raise the retirement age to save Social Security and Medicare. What are the chances of the two sides coming together to make any of this happen? Budget cuts in defense and raising the retirement age.
All right, you got pressed for time, so I'm going to give you the hard-hitting answer here. Okay, Social Security is 100% self-funding.
Yes,
your donations
it
to
always
this
has
cause,
been.
the FICA, do not have any bearing whatsoever on it. Let me tell you, the only thing the trust fund does, it has the authorization. That's it. Nothing more. It's got the authority to approve payments. But guess where the payments come from? The same place the money goes when you pay Ukraine. The same place the money comes from everywhere. It doesn't come from a trust fund.
Right.
The trust fund is purely
paper
authorization.
Yeah.
Okay. So you want to fix that? It's not about raising the age, cutting spending here to pay spending there. It's about changing 4 words: that Congress shall make all payments, just like it says in the Medicare Trust Fund. Just the same way. The difference is that back when FDR wrote this bill, when they put this in there.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Oh, there you are.
He knew, point blank, that if he did not leave it the way it was, that it would have a chance of being taken away. So that was the whole point of it. It was just to preserve it from being stolen away, because at least everybody had skin in the game. But it's fake skin in the game. So the answer is get rid of FICA completely and literally allow it to float on its own accord. As we need it, let the money go out. Expand it. Make it better. Make it bigger. Make it badder. But that right there, that's the answer.
Steve Grumbine, thanks for joining us. Steve is the founder and the CEO of the nonprofits Real Progressives and Real Progress in Action, and host of the podcast Macro and Cheese, and he's also a leading activist and evangelist for modern monetary theory. We're going to take, I think it's like the first break.
Yeah.
You're listening to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik.